Thank you very much, and thanks to all of the testifiers. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Locklear, let me start with you. As we know, November 1st, funds for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, will run out. For my tribe in Duck Valley, the loss of SNAP funding means that 200 families, or 50 to 60% of their tribe, would lose access to essential food support. In response, the tribe is preparing to rely on traditional practices, such as hunting elk to feed their members. It's important to highlight how serious of an issue this will become. This Saturday, tribes all across our country will lose access to essential food services. Mr. Locklear, can you specify what actions or emergency measures is the Indian Health Board planning to take to address the health impacts of the loss of SNAP support for our tribal communities?
Sure, absolutely. So we are working with our partners across Indian country, including the Coalition for Tribal Sovereignty, to ensure that we are providing the most resources for tribes to understand what their options are during this time. There are tribes who are, as we mentioned earlier, who have already issued state of emergencies, who are going to really access their own funding. But ultimately, tribes are going to have to tap into their funding to provide for their resources for their people. That's funding that may run out that they have on reserves.
So can I ask you, when you're talking, let's talk specifically Duck Valley, if they were to reach out to you, what would you tell them, where they could go for assistance?
I would probably coordinate. So in the National Indian Health Board, we work with our partners who work with SNAP. We don't directly work with SNAP at the National Indian Health Board, but we do support those who do. We ultimately will help any issues that come out of it related to health in any way that we can.
And are you, is that something you obviously normally do, but are you putting additional staff dedicated to addressing this during this period?
That's a wonderful question. Unfortunately, due to funding restraints and also that most of the national organizations such as NIHB, nonprofits, rely heavily on federal funding to help support a lot of their programs, which are also being restricted at this time. And
outside of the government shutdown, that restriction has occurred. Limitations to funding.
Limitations of funding
to
have consistently occurred. So we are looking at other partners, philanthropy, to help booster that. But we are putting our own resources, our own reserves to make sure that we are supporting Indian country in this moment the best that we can.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Upton, in Indian country where access to home ownership is already limited, the community development financial institutions have been a critical resource in helping our tribal families access financing, especially after natural disasters. Can you talk a little bit about, with the proposed elimination of the CDFI fund, how do you see this impacting the ability of tribal communities to make long-term housing decisions and recover from natural disasters?
There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you for that question. You know, the elimination of the CDFI fund would be detrimental to all the hard work, especially getting the USDA 502 relending program, the momentum going for that, because that program there proved to support two native CDFIs in 2019 did more home loans in 1 year than the USDA did in 10 years.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is native CDFIs were in our communities, we know our communities, and we're there working every day in our communities to get homeowners into a home. And the elimination of these funds, the way that we capital stack anymore and the way that we bring deals together, it's native communities helping native communities. And I can see we've had the biggest struggle in getting low-interest, long-term capital. And finally, with the USDA 502 relending program, it's finally in sight that we could do that. It's a $50 million, potentially $50 million annual allotment for housing. And it would put us back 10, 15 years of all the hard work that our native CDFIs have done. And if the fund is eliminated, our work would stop, and we're going to have to find another avenue. But the CDFI fund itself, it's a stamp for investors to say that you are investable. So we bring in private capital at a rate 8 to 1. So to answer your question, it would be devastating for our tribal communities. And right now, native CDFIs are playing a big, big part of it and bringing other partners in on a daily basis to supply housing for our tribal communities.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Smith.
Well, thank you so much, Vice Chair Schatz, and thanks to all of you for being here today. This is such a useful opportunity for us to hear about what's happening, the real-life impacts as we struggle through this administration and this shutdown. And I'm really glad to see Mr. Upton here. You have been such a great friend and advocate, and to help my office in many ways as we've done all of the work on CDFIs and native CDFIs. And so maybe I just want to start by following up a bit on Senator Cortez Masto's questions, because I'm trying to get at what are kind of the actual on-the-ground impacts of the way in which kind of the mass firing of the CDFI fund staff at Treasury, like what impact that's really having. And in your testimony, you write about how none of the 3 largest home lenders in the U.S. issue federally guaranteed mortgages for the construction of new permanent homes on tribal lands, so like 0. I mean, this is where CDFIs have played such an integral role, as you said, because you know your communities. I just want to pause on that for a minute, see if there's any additional information you think would be useful for the committee to understand when we think about that, kind of financial desert on tribal lands when it comes to home mortgages without CDFIs.
Without CDFIs, the greatest challenge that we have is being able to bring in, and I spoke with CDFIs up in Alaska yesterday, and it's an ecosystem that we have, and it's bringing in all the federal programs to support the capital needs to home mortgages. And whether it be new market tax credits, the USDA, there's a number of leveraging tools that we use to fulfill our long-term capital needs. But I think more than anything, the shutdown currently, what it's doing, when you think about this, the CDFI fund itself, there's about $6 billion of funding that they roll out annually. And I just ran the numbers through a couple colleagues. There's about 81 employees currently at the CDFI fund before the RIF. Mm-hmm. And with that $6 billion, they administer and the policy and they review the applications, the award process, the compliance, the monitoring, the data analysis, the reporting, the cross-agency coordination, but more than anything, they oversee the certification.
Right.
So there's so much that those staff members do that's not happening right now. Mm-hmm. And without the 2025 awards that should be rolled out as we speak here, the TA awards were announced, but there's no one to process those awards. And more than anything, it is causing, maybe, I wouldn't say a lot of fear, but it's that golden stamp that philanthropy sees, that you're a certified native CDFI and you are investable.
You have
so
that.
Maybe there might be some treading back a little bit. It's going to slow the process down if we don't get the staff reversed and get them back to work.
Get those RIFT people back on the ground, right, exactly. Well, there's so much to talk about here. I appreciate very much you being here. I want to turn to Ms. Harris. Thank you so much for being here. And though I was not here for opening statements, I understand that you spoke about how the president of USCT is not able to be here because they're busy trying to figure out how to cover the gaps, the huge gaps that are being left in the nutrition program because of this looming refusal by the president to spend money that he's authorized to spend to pay for SNAP programs. And of course, tribal lands have this kind of, you have this nutrition assistance, which is extremely important, SNAP, but then you also have the FDIPR program, which is really important. And I'm hearing from Minnesota tribes that there's like kind of switching happening right now as people are trying to figure out where is the best place to be able to get stable sources of nutrition assistance for folks on tribal lands. And people are in the midst of sort of trying to figure out how to change their benefits, and all of this on top of all of these massive cuts to SNAP that happened in the one big beautiful bill, so-called. So I'd love to just hear you comment on this and say a bit more about what you're hearing from members of the communities that you represent.
Certainly. I think that one of the things that has been incredibly challenging for tribes during shutdown and with the rifts is just the complete lack of transparency.
Yes,
as well.
Exactly. You don't know what to do, where to go.
No one knows what to do or what's going on, and they can't also get in touch with any of their agency, partners at this point in time. So everyone is just sort of flying in the dark and trying to do the best that they can at this moment in time. But I think it's also important to recognize, too, that tribal nations, we already face long-standing and continuing challenges with providing access to healthy and nutritious food for our citizens. And the challenges contribute to health and educational and overall wellness disparities across all of our tribal communities. Yep. And the current situation with SNAP and WIC only further exacerbates the situation. And we must further subsidize to provide for the failure of our federal partners to meet their trust and treaty obligations. Yeah. I mean, tribal nations are my own tribal nation is having to monetarily subsidize for, the WIC and SNAP benefits that some of our citizens are not providing. And given the emergent nature of all of this crisis, tribes are scrambling, and so they're spending their own time and resources, to provide the most basic of human needs, food, for their citizens.
I know that I'm out of time, and so I'm so sorry to cut you off, but I want to respect the chair and vice chair, but I just want to, I really want to put a point on what you said about how the federal government has a trust and treaty responsibility to provide nutrition assistance, housing, other fundamental basics as part of the treaties that we signed. This is not a nice to, is not a may, it is a shall.
Yes.
And that is the difference here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Thank you all for your testimony that you have shared. I think particularly as we're going into the winter in Alaska, and I know that in many parts of Indian country, it's very real up in Minnesota. Maybe not so much in Hawaii or Nevada, but the concerns about food versus fuel that you have referenced, Mr. Mallott, I think that they are very real when we talk about food insecurity. And we have heard and seen the pictures of the loss from the typhoon Halong, and you see devastation within the village. But the part of it that is really heartrending is when you see freezers that had been stocked with subsistence foods, the seal, the berries, all that had been gathered that would take these families through the winter, that now is lost because there's no power in these villages. And so their food source for the winter is gone. And then the reliance on SNAP, as you have pointed out in so many of these communities. So this is a point that for many in Alaska is tangibly real and tangibly frightening. And so everything that we can do to make sure that that SNAP and WIC funding is able to proceed, I think has got to be a priority for us. I appreciate the comment that you made, Vice Chairman Harris, in recognizing that it's not just IHS, BIE, BIA that are tribal programs that we need to focus on, that this is where the trust and treaty responsibility is. It is through so many tribal serving programs, and that's what we're talking about here across so many of these accounts, and how our Native people are impacted. I think it's somewhat timely. Apparently, there's an analysis that has been released by the Brookings Institute about how they call structural flaws and how the federal government finances its obligations to Native nations, Native American people, and actually suggesting that this might, the impact of the shutdown and the real-world consequences on what it means for food, for fuel, for access to financing, for health care, for education, that maybe this is that moment for reform. So rather than kind of reverting to business as usual, you kind of reevaluate how the federal government is meeting its funding obligations to our tribes and Native citizens. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Bird, because your comment about the impact of the RIFs on Office of Indian Education, you said that 7 of 9 have been terminated as of today. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So 7 or 9 are terminated. We've got we have the office. We have the director of the office in place, right?
Correct.
And then this is an office that administers millions of dollars in formula and discretionary grants. I'm told that last month 28 grants were awarded from the office for Alaska Native education. So effectively, you've got nobody at home to award these grants, administer these grants. Is that a fair summation of where we are right now?
Yes, that's pretty fair. They basically have no contact within the office to handle their drawdowns for their funds, to relay technical assistance, to help with their data collection that they need to process with their school districts. So really they have basically no help in the D.C. office with the Office of Indian Education. And it's so important for the students to get the academic support, tutoring, assistance for the Indian parent committees. So the lack of the resources in D.C. in the Office of Indian Education is lacking. And so that really leaves the communities really struggling in their school districts to understand what's happening.
And then you also touched on Tribal Head Start. And I'm hearing from grantees in my state that are concerned about the impact effective November 1 in terms of these grantees, but also not being able to access technical assistance. There's a stop work order that was received. What does that? What impact will that have on our tribal Head Starts if there's nobody, again, there to help with technical assistance?
Well, in some communities, obviously, they have to prepare for their next round or request for funding, and so they don't really have the information in place to provide for their auditing purposes as far as getting ready to submit their next level of funding sources. So they're basically caught with behind the 8 ball, basically, because they need the assistance up front before they even apply for their next round of funding.
Mr. Upton, I want to turn to you about CDFIs and the certifications by Treasury. You basically said that there's no Treasury staff to process these certifications. And so if you can't process them, okay, tell me what happens. Tell me what happens in terms of the inability of Treasury to move forward with any certifications when we're talking about access to capital markets.
Without certification, it really gives certification gives investors, philanthropy partners, federal agencies confidence that the funds they deploy to us, whether it be through a form of a grant, it's that golden stamp that we're going to deploy that money with integrity, accountability, and measurable impact.
So you're saying it's a stamp of approval. So if you don't have the stamp, does that mean that you're less likely to be able to access that loan?
You're going to be less likely to have philanthropy. Philanthropy already, Native-led organizations are less than 2% of total philanthropy giving. And with the native CDFIs especially, it's so important that we have that certification, because without it, I fear that philanthropy isn't going to be as giving and as open to. There's no guarantee. It's the certification. It's the golden stamp that you are what you say you are. And the CDFI fund has certified that all of your accountability, you're doing what you said you were going to do with the money that they gave you. And that's probably the most important when it comes to bringing on private investors and private capital to the work that we do, is that it builds the trust. It builds a trusting relationship with our funders. So without it, there's many programs that you're required to have that CDFI certification to even apply. And I know there's a lot of investments through, whether it be a investment from a bank, also they're going to require some sort of certification. So I think that is my fear, that those types of investments will disappear, and they'll disappear quickly.
You turned it. Vice Chair Schatz.
Thank you, Chair Murkowski. Secretary Harris, thanks for being here. We've seen tribes furlough some of their own staff and have to keep and take loans out. Can you just drill down for me on some of the scenarios that certain tribes are going through with this lack of funding? Just tell us what's happening.
Well, we're hearing from different member tribes of USET, and I know one of the things that we've heard anecdotally that tribes are looking at is securing lines of credit. Because right now there were, grants that they anticipated would be coming, but there's no information about whether or not they will be coming or not. And when, we're taking out lines of credit, we're also, incurring interest payments on those lines of credit. And then that later, pulls tribal funding away from things that could be going to programs. And then at the end of the day, there's no guarantee that those will even come through. My own tribe is having to supplement SNAP assistance, and also, our daycare facility is due to have a grant. We just recently opened that, and now we're having to supplement that and, pay for the daycare facility on our own. I know that many of our tribal members are setting up, food banks and trying to work with, state and local governments in order to supplement that. Others, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, are trying to supplement with their own, hunting and, traditional foods. And I think overall, the biggest thing is just that there's no transparency, there's no end in sight, and there's no information. I mean, tribal governments are resilient and resourceful, and we are problem solvers, but it's difficult to know what you're even solving for, if it's short term or if it's long term. And so I think everyone right now is just, dealing with what's in front of them and trying to find stopgap measures to provide for our tribal citizens until, there's more clarity. And just, I guess at this point, starting to anticipate that this may be a lot longer, and that will require more thinking and more, measures on how to deal with that.
And how much, you may not be able to answer this question because I'm not sure any of us quite know, but it seems to me there are at least two things going on, right? There's the expiration of the appropriations bill, and that has pretty direct impacts on tribes. But then there's also these RIFs that are not really required under the Anti-Deficiency Act. So can you figure out what's causing what?
I mean, the RIFs, I know I can speak from my own experience, the RIFs are causing us to not be able to even know in some cases. I mean, we don't know if the person is furloughed, or we don't know if the person has been permanently let go. I mean, historically speaking, I can say that I worked during the Obama administration as the Chief of Staff for Indian Affairs. And at that point in time, and I checked this today, we had around 8,000 employees when we went through the 2013 shutdown. And currently there's about 6,000 employees as identified in the September 2025 contingency planning. And even at that point in time, I mean, we were struggling to meet the need. And, the fact is that RIFs violate the trust and treaty obligations, and no one's arguing that Indian Affairs or the BIA were ever overstaffed or overfunded, and no one argues that other federal agencies don't have the same trust and treaty obligations as the BIA and BIE. It's the opposite. So, and Congress has, again and again on a partisan basis, sought to ameliorate this inequality. But the RIFs are basically taking a hatchet to the progress that we've made in the delivery of trust obligations, and it's really, taking the authority of Congress away to provide for the trust and treaty obligations. But I think it's really, in essence, it's just a lack of information about what is actually going on, who is actually still at the department, if this is a temporary shutdown thing or if it's going to be a permanent RIF situation. And I think it's just leaving our members confused and without the ability to even properly confront the problem that's in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we have some policy disagreements, obviously, related to the shutdown and even related to Indian country. But I think it is at least fair if this administration is going to sort of execute a sort of rolling series of RIFs. And, because of my relationship with the chair, I'm trying to avoid any sort of partisan vibe here. But it is at least fair to try to figure out what is related to the shutdown and what is not, because I'm quite worried that we could end up on the other side of this shutdown and in a short-term continuing resolution while we work on the rest of the appropriations process. And then we find that, it turns out 2/3 of the problems were just a lack of human beings to push out grants, to communicate with tribes and tribal leaders, and programs that serve Native people across the country. So I actually think we, as a committee, need to sort out, to the extent that it's possible, what is what. And I understand that in the politics of it all, it's part of a piece, right? It's a point that one party is trying to make to the other, and then the other party, and then it's just partisan warfare. But you need to know, if this thing is over at some point next month, are your problems over, or are you still suffering through 30% of it, 90% of it, 2% of it? And the fact that we don't know the answer to that we don't know, and you don't know, I think is a problem. We need to at least ground ourselves in the same set of facts.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Senator Schatz. I would agree. I think we need that kind of information. I don't remember how early it was in this session, but we had a hearing here in Indian Affairs to look at the impact of some of the reductions in force, what the layoffs, the impact of the layoffs were having on again. So many of these tribal serving programs, where we had the Secretary of HHS say very clearly, I'm going to hold IHS harmless in this, and when it came to those layoffs, we saw that. But I think it was important for the administration to see it's not just in, again, IHS, BIA, BIE. It is in so many of these other programs where, again, tribal citizens are being served. So understanding the implications of all of this is kind of part of where we are today. I just want to ask a couple really quick follow-ons. And Mr. Mallott, this one is directed to you. I was asked earlier in the hallway by a reporter about LIHEAP, because they know for us in the north and those in the east this time of year, LIHEAP is important to our colder weather places. And I was asked, do I have any idea how long LIHEAP funds are going to be available? And I'm told that there was supposed to be a new round of funding supposed to go out to the states and the tribes by the 1st of November. That's apparently not going to happen. Some tribes may have leftover funds. Are you hearing from folks back home about LIHEAP?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. In my oral remarks, also forgot to thank you for sponsoring Senate Bill 3024, Keep SNAP Funded Act, so thank you for that. Regarding LIHEAP, I was able to talk to Jackie Pata this morning, who's one of our Clean Haida, and she managed LEAP for Southeast. You're right that the funding that hits November 1st might not happen. Right now, LIHEAP is administered by a lot of tribes or tribal organizations in each region of Alaska. They usually start with elders first, so I believe they're taking applications right now in the hopes that the government will open in time. If November 1 doesn't hit, they don't have any funds to give out that assistance. And then with the combination SNAP is going to, especially our elders who are first in line for LIHEAP, it's going to have them probably figuring out between medication, food, or heat for their homes. As I went through and figured and got comments from the communities, a lot of our rural Alaska communities don't have local food banks. It's up to the tribe that does that services, and LIHEAP's a big one of that. So for our elders especially, they might have an application in. There's no guarantee when they'll get that funding. So again, it's going to be a crunch as we hit November with the combination SNAP and LIHEAP. With that said, too, we also don't know about the RIFs or furloughs, right? You know, if the government opens next week, how long would it get them the money out? And any delays is going to further exacerbate the system, the process.
I mean, there's so much uncertainty that is at play here. We can't figure out the path forward right now on our spending bills, although I am a little bit more optimistic on that today. But it just seems that there's more and more concerns that are coming up with whether it's the general funds of the smaller tribes talking about, we don't have very much left in our available funds here. The potential that some of our tribal employers are going to have to start working without pay or being laid off. Challenges that come with paying banks when 105L and contract support costs payments aren't coming in. So there's all of this that is at play that is just so challenging, so difficult, so worrisome, and in my view, so unnecessary. There's no good reason for a shutdown ever, and yet we are in the midst of the second longest, and I have no desire in wanting to beat the goal of the longest government shutdown. So my hope is that not only will we get the government open quickly, we will get a move on with our appropriations bills that need to be resolved now, but also going forward a more certain process. And again, I think given the comments that we've heard from the vice chair and what I said earlier about maybe looking at this as a moment for critical review about how we, the federal government, meet the trust responsibilities and obligations to our tribes, to American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians. This might be the kick in the fanny that we need to look a little more critically at that. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for making the effort to be here today. Thank you for your testimony. For those who would ask for follow-up questions, for the record, we're going to hold it open for a couple weeks now. But again, thank you for being part of our very important hearing today and allowing these issues to come forward. And with that, the committee stands adjourned.